There are cities that ended in ways that science cannot account for. In Pakistan, 40,000 people maintained a drainage system more sophisticated than Victorian London. Then, around 1900 years before our time, they left. No invasion, no famine signature in the soil, no plague marker in the bones. They simply stopped. The city stood empty. The drains stayed clean. In Bolivia, builders positioned blocks of volcanic stone so precisely that no mortar was needed and no gap wide enough for a blade exists between them. Then they left too. No record of who they were, no name, no language recovered. In the Pacific Ocean, a population of fewer than 30,000 people moved 750,000 metric tons of basalt across open water over 4 centuries. Then, the city was abandoned. Local legend says the stones were flown through the air. The scientists who studied it said, and this is a direct quote, "Not bad for people who had no pulleys, no levers, and no metal." In Mexico, a city of 200,000 people smashed every statue of every ruler before they walked away. Every single one. On purpose. No one knows why. These are 8 cities. None has a complete explanation. We begin in a place that most people have heard of, but very few truly understand. And we begin there because it sets the standard against which everything else on this list becomes impossible. The year is 1922. Rakaldas Bandyopadhyay, a 37-year-old officer of the Archaeological Survey of India, is standing in the Sindh desert looking at a mound that everyone else has already dismissed. The British authorities were not interested. There was a Buddhist stupa protruding from the top of it, a meditation structure, probably a few centuries old. Not worth the trouble. Bandyopadhyay starts digging anyway. A few feet below the stupa, he cuts his finger on something inside a pottery vessel. He pulls it out. It is a microlith, a stone tool, that belongs to a world far older than any Buddhist monk. He writes to his superior, John Marshall, immediately. Marshall does not publish the letter. He does not publish Bandyopadhyay's report. He eventually takes over the excavation himself, and Bandyopadhyay, the man who found one of the greatest cities in human history, dies at 45 without seeing his own name in print above his own discovery. What he found beneath that mound was this: a city of at least 40,000 people, built around 2,500 years before our time, laid out on a grid of streets running precisely north to south and east to west. Every brick across the entire city, mansion or drain, rich quarter or poor, was cut to the same ratio, 1 to 2 to 4. Height, width, length, not approximately, exactly, across 300 hectares of construction. Below those streets ran a covered sewage network, brick-lined, sealed with mortar, deep enough to walk through at its largest points. Over 700 wells supplied the city, 1 for every 3 houses. Every bathroom in every home connected to the municipal system through vertical chutes in the walls. John Marshall, excavating in 1925, wrote that this drainage infrastructure existed even in the poorest quarters of the city. European cities would not reach this standard until the 19th century. That is a gap of approximately 3,700 years. Around 1900 years before our time, the city was abandoned. 44 human skeletons were found scattered across the site. But dating showed they died across different periods, spanning possibly 1,000 years. No single event, no mass casualty, no invasion scar in the soil, no famine signature in the bones, no plague marker identified. The archaeologist George Dales, who spent years examining the skeletal evidence, asked in print, "Where are the burned fortresses, the weapons, the bodies of invaders and defenders?" There are none. The city simply stopped. The drains were still intact. The wells were still lined. The bricks were still in their walls. 40,000 people maintained the world's most sophisticated urban sanitation system for centuries. And then, without leaving a written word or a single explanation, they walked away and never came back. What does a civilization carry when it leaves? And what does it mean that this one carried nothing we can identify? That question stays with us. But the city we visit next offers a different kind of silence. Not the silence of departure, but the silence of tools that have never been found, cutting stone that should not have been cuttable, at an altitude where nothing grows and no one should have been building anything at all. Mohenjo-Daro vanished into silence. What sits on a Bolivian plateau 12,800 feet above sea level has a different problem. Not disappearance, but presence. It exists in a form that the tools of its era could not have produced. And the tools that could have produced it did not exist for another 1,500 years. The year is 1549. A Spanish conquistador named Pedro Chiesa de Leon is crossing the Bolivian plateau searching for the southern capital of the Inca Empire. He is not looking for Puma Punku. He does not know it exists. When he finds it, he stops. He asks the Incas, the most sophisticated engineering civilization on the continent at that moment, whether they built this place. The Incas tell him no. They tell him it was already ancient when their own civilization began. They tell him it was made, in their tradition, by gods. Chiesa de Leon writes it all down and moves on. He has no framework for what he has seen. Neither do we. Puma Punku sits on the Bolivian altiplano at 12,800 feet above sea level, above the natural tree line, on a plain with no timber for rollers, no nearby quarry for its largest stones, and no navigable water route for transport. Its biggest block is a slab of red sandstone 8 meters long, 5 meters wide, and 1.5 meters thick. It weighs 131 metric tons. It came from a quarry 10 kilometers away. The andesite blocks used for precision carvings came from the Copacabana Peninsula, 90 kilometers away, across open water. The stones were moved, we do not know how. But the stone cutting is the harder problem. One block at the site contains a groove running its full length. The groove is 6 millimeters wide. Along the groove sits a row of holes, each 4 millimeters in diameter. The deviation in depth between any two holes does not exceed 1/10 of a millimeter. Jean-Pierre Pratzen and Stella Nair, the architectural historians who conducted the first professional field study of the Tiwanaku stones, spent years attempting to replicate the precision found across the site. They succeeded in replicating some shapes. One element defeated them entirely. They wrote, and this is their conclusion, that to obtain the smooth finishes, perfectly planar faces, and exact interior right angles found at Puma Punku, the builders, and I am quoting directly, resorted to techniques unknown to the Incas and to us at this time. There is one more detail. Scattered across the site are eye-shaped metal clamps used to lock stone blocks together. They are composed of a copper, arsenic, nickel, bronze alloy. Precise analysis shows the alloy contains 95% copper, 2% arsenic, and 1.5% nickel. There is no natural source of nickel anywhere in Bolivia, and the clamps in the south canal of Puma Punku were not brought and inserted. They were poured. Molten metal was introduced directly into the eye-shaped sockets already carved in the stone. The builders had portable smelters. They were working bronze at 12,800 feet altitude with no local nickel source, achieving alloy tolerances precise enough to require on-site casting. Remember that. It connects to something we will see later in this list, something built at the exact same time, on the same continent, that has no metal at all. The open question is simple and still unanswered. No tool capable of producing that 6 millimeter groove, those 4 millimeter holes, those perpendicular interior angles, has ever been found at the site. Not a chisel, not a template, nothing. The builders of Puma Punku left more precision in stone than we can replicate. more metallurgical sophistication than their location should have permitted. And then they left nothing behind that tells us how. What they left behind next, 12,000 years earlier, on a mountaintop in Turkey, built even less with even less. And it changed everything we thought we knew about when human beings were capable of organizing it all. Hold on to what you just heard about Puma Punku's builders using portable smelters. We will return to that fact, because it connects to something on this list that changes its meaning completely. First, we need to go back, not forward. 12,000 years back, to a mountaintop in Turkey, where something was built that made archaeologists question whether civilization itself had been running in reverse. In October of 1994, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt arrived at an unremarkable hilltop in southeastern Turkey, carrying a survey report from 1963. The 1963 report had dismissed the hill as a medieval cemetery. The stone shapes protruding from the ground, a team from the universities of Chicago and Istanbul had concluded, were just old gravestones, not worth excavating. Schmidt looked at those same shapes and saw something else entirely. He recognized them as the upper portions of T-shaped stone pillars, the kind he had been excavating at another site nearby. He dropped to his knees and began to clear the soil by hand. Within days, he knew he was standing on the oldest monumental architecture ever found on Earth. Göbekli Tepe, Potbelly Hill in Turkish, was built around 9,500 years before our time. It predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years. It predates the first known cities by 5,000. And it was built by people who had no agriculture, no pottery, no permanent settlements, and no domesticated animals. People who were, by every definition archaeology had used until that moment, hunter-gatherers. What they left behind are circular enclosures. Each enclosure contains T-shaped limestone pillars standing up to 5.5 meters tall, weighing 8 to 10 metric tons each, covered in carved reliefs of foxes, vultures, snakes, scorpions, and animals that still have not been fully identified. The central pillars in the largest enclosure have arms carved along their sides. Schmidt believed the T-shape itself was intentional. The horizontal bar is a head, the shaft is a body. The pillars are not rocks, they are people. Enormous, silent, stone people facing inward. Now here is what the geometry tells us. In 2019, Israeli archaeologist Gil Hakle of the Israel Antiquities Authority published a study in the Cambridge Archaeological Journal. Using computer algorithms to analyze the positioning of enclosures B, C, and D, the three oldest structures at the site, Hakle found something that should not be there. The center point of each enclosure, located exactly midway between the two central pillars, had been placed with precision. When you connect those 3 points, they form a nearly perfect equilateral triangle with sides of exactly 19.25 meters, and the vertices fall less than 25 centimeters from geometric perfection. Hakle's conclusion: these three structures were not built separately over centuries. They were designed and planned together as a single project before the first stone was moved. He told Haaretz, "The odds of this occurring by chance are very low. The implication is this: someone, 11,500 years ago, made a scaled drawing, or a rope model, of 3 interconnected stone circles before building any of them. They had an architect. And the architect was a hunter-gatherer who had never planted a crop in their life." Klaus Schmidt spent the rest of his career working this hilltop. He died here in 2014, a heart attack while swimming, at 60 years old. His phrase, the one that became the rallying cry of a new understanding of human history, was simply this: first came the temple, then the city. But why build it at all? And having built it, having carved 10-ton pillars by hand, arranged them with geometric precision no one thought possible for 11,000 years ago, decorated each one with a bestiary of the ancient world. Why walk away? The fill that covers the oldest structures at Göbekli Tepe was not put there by time. Whether it was placed deliberately or arrived through collapse and landslide, archaeologists have argued for 30 years. What is not argued is this: someone covered it, and then someone left, and left nothing behind that tells us why. In 1873, a Polish ethnographer named Johann Stanislaus Kubary arrived on the island of Pohnpei in the western Pacific Ocean. He was working for a museum in Hamburg, collecting artifacts from islands most Europeans had never heard of. He was 26 years old. He had already survived a failed uprising against Russian rule in Warsaw, fled to Germany, sailed to Samoa, learned Samoan, catalogued birds in Fiji, and fought an influenza epidemic in Palau so effectively that the local people admitted him to their most secret rituals. When he reached Pohnpei and found Nan Madol, he stopped cataloging. He spent months there. He produced the first detailed map and written description of a city built on a coral reef, composed of 92 artificial islands separated by tidal canals, walled in black basalt columns stacked like enormous logs, some walls 7.5 meters tall, some 5 meters thick. He attempted to use his compass to survey it. The compass would not cooperate. The basalt used to build Nan Madol contains magnetite, the same iron-rich mineral that makes the ocean floor magnetic. Bring a compass close to the stone and the needle moves for reasons that have nothing to do with north. Kubary mapped it anyway, by other means. Then he left Pohnpei in August of 1874 with 100 crates of artifacts. The ship wrecked. Almost everything was lost. Here is what the stones of Nan Madol tell us, even without Kubary's lost collection. Radiocarbon dating shows that megalithic construction began around 1180 years into the current era, and it continued for approximately 4 centuries. The total weight of basalt moved, stacked, and arranged across those 92 artificial islands is 750,000 metric tons. The only archaeologist based permanently on Pohnpei, Rufino Maurizio, has calculated what that figure means across the construction period. 1,850 tons per year, every year, for 400 years. He was asked what he made of it. He said, and I am quoting directly, "Not bad for people who had no pulleys, no levers, and no metal." Read that again. No pulleys, no levers, no metal. The population of Nan Madol at its peak did not exceed 1,000 people. The island of Pohnpei, which provided the workforce, held an estimated 25,000. They moved 750,000 metric tons of volcanic rock into the open ocean and built a city on a reef. And they did it without the mechanical advantage of a single lever. There is no fresh water on Nan Madol. There is no arable land. Every drop of water and every piece of food consumed on those islands during the 4.5 centuries of occupation was transported by boat from the mainland. The city was not just difficult to build, it was logistically impossible to sustain. And yet, it was sustained for longer than the entire recorded history of the United States has so far lasted. There are no written records of any of this. Not a single inscription, not a glyph, not a notation on stone or bark or clay. Everything known about who built Nan Madol, why they built it, how they moved the stone, and where precisely the quarries were, what the 92 islands were each used for. All of it comes from oral tradition alone. Pohnpeian legend says it was built by twin sorcerers named Olisipa and Olosopa, who levitated the stones with the aid of a flying dragon. That is the only construction record that exists. The open question is not the one people usually ask. The question is not how they moved the stone. The question is why anyone chose this place at all. An uninhabitable reef, with no water and no food, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and then chose to stay for 400 years. No answer has been found. What comes next in our list is the opposite in almost every way. Not an island, but a river valley. In 1994, A Peruvian archaeologist named Ruth Shady Solis first visited the Supa Valley, 180 kilometers north of Lima, in a desert region with no paved roads, no electricity, and no public water supply. She looked at the hills on the valley floor and saw what geologists had been telling everyone for decades were natural formations. She knew they were not natural. In 1996, with a small crew and often using her own money, she began excavating the largest of the mounds. For 2 full months, they searched the debris for what every ancient site contains: pottery fragments, the ubiquitous broken sherds that appear at every human settlement and tell archaeologists when a culture existed. They found none, not one. This made Shady more excited, not less, and the absence of pottery meant the city was pre-ceramic, older than the invention of fired clay vessels in the region, older than anything yet found in the Americas. When the radiocarbon dates came back from laboratories in the United States and Germany in 2001, they confirmed it. Caral had been occupied from approximately 2,600 years before the current era. The Great Pyramid of Khufu was built around 2,560 years before the current era. Caral and the Egyptian pyramids are contemporaneous. The city covers 150 hectares. It contains 6 large platform pyramids, 2 sunken circular plazas, an amphitheater capable of holding hundreds of people, residential quarters for an elite class at the summits of the pyramids, worker housing at their bases, and a system of irrigation canals feeding agriculture in the surrounding desert. What it doesn't contain, across 150 hectares of excavation, across a civilization that lasted 800 years, is a single weapon. No weapon has been found at Caral of any kind. Anthropologist Jonathan Haas, reviewing the complete record, stated there is no evidence of warfare, in his precise words, of any kind or at any level during the pre-ceramic period. No mutilated bodies, no burned buildings, no defensive walls, no fortifications, no arrowheads, no clubs, no siege architecture. Settlement patterns across the entire Supa Valley are completely non-defensive in orientation. Archaeology has theories about how civilizations organize. The standard model says humans move toward complexity primarily for mutual defense. The Caral demolished that model. A city of 3,000 people built 6 pyramids and lasted 800 years without once, in any layer of sediment or any excavated structure, leaving a mark of organized violence. Inside the amphitheater, Shady's team found 32 flutes. They were carved from condor bone and pelican bone. They were decorated with painted figures of local fauna and humans. They are among the oldest musical instruments in the Americas. 32 flutes, no weapons, 800 years. Now hold that image against what we found in City 2. Puma Punku sits on the same continent, South America. 3,000 years after Caral flourished and was abandoned, the builders of Puma Punku arrived at their high plateau in Bolivia with copper arsenic nickel alloy, portable smelters, and precision metalworking that the most sophisticated civilization of their era did not possess. They cast metal into stone sockets at 12,800 feet. They cut grooves 6 millimeters wide to tolerances 1/10 of a millimeter. Their technology was, by every measurable criterion, more advanced than anything in the region before them. And here is what the two cities share. Caral left no record of how its people chose to organize a society without violence. Not a document, not a text, not an inscription. Puma Punku left no tool capable of producing its own stonework, no chisel, no template, no instrument that could have made that groove. 2 civilizations on the same continent. One had the most sophisticated metalworking in the pre-Columbian Andes. One built the most peaceful urban center in recorded human history. 3,000 years apart. No overlap, no contact we can trace. Neither one left a record of how they became what they were. The question Caral forces is not about technology. It is about something harder. It is this: If a city of 3,000 people can organize complex society, build 6 pyramids, sustain 800 years of occupation, and never once produce a weapon, what does that mean about the cities that did? We do not know. The story of Dwarka begins twice, once in 1983 and once in 2001. In 1983, Dr. S.R. Rao of the National Institute of Oceanography began the first systematic underwater excavations in Indian waters off the coast of Gujarat. He led 12 dive campaigns over 7 years. His team found stone structures lying on the seabed at depths of 3 to 6 meters. Well-dressed blocks, L-shaped cuttings, the remnants of walls and bastions extending more than half a kilometer from shore. They also found stone anchors, over 120 of them, of multiple types, triangular, grapnel, and ringstone. Documented and published in the International Journal of Nautical Archaeology in 2001. The largest anchor weighed 496 kilograms. Rao named the site the ancient harbor of Dwarka. When asked, in the years that followed, how certain he was of the identification, he said, "Only the name board is missing." In 2001, oceanographers from the National Institute of Ocean Technology were conducting routine pollution surveys in the Gulf of Combat, off the same coast, using side-scan sonar. The sonar returned images of geometrically regular structures on the ocean floor at 30 to 40 meters depth, 9 kilometers offshore. Dredging recovered organic material. The wood was sent to laboratories in India and Germany. 2 independent institutions returned dates of approximately 7,500 to 9,500 years before the present. The academic community questioned whether the wood could be definitively linked to the structures rather than deposited by river currents. The dispute has not been resolved. The structures have not been excavated by controlled archaeological methods. In January 2000, Rao submitted a formal proposal to India's Ministry of Culture for continued excavation at Dwarka. The proposal required 14 crore rupees, less than $2 million at the exchange rate of the time. It outlined 3 phases of work: an underwater museum, and a heritage designation. The Ministry of Culture's secretary visited the site and promised support. Nothing came of it. The proposal collected dust. Rao's research contract was not renewed. He had reached the age of 72, and the funding body did not extend it. He died on the 3rd of January, 2013. The site has remained largely unexplored since. Derinkuyu was hidden below Turkish soil until someone knocked down a wall. Dwarka sits in open water, coordinates known, structures photographed and published in peer-reviewed journals, anchors cataloged and dated. And it has been largely left there. Not because we cannot reach it, because so far we have chosen not to. 6 cities, 6 disappearances, 6 silences where a civilization's final words should be. Here is what the pattern suggests. Civilization is not a ladder, one rung above the last, progress permanent, loss impossible. It is something closer to a wheel. It turns. It has turned before. The people who built Göbekli Tepe and Caral and Mohenjo-Daro were not primitive ancestors on their way to becoming us. They may have been us on the way down. What we call progress may be recovery. And here is the question that follows from that, which no one can answer. Is what we are building now legible to whoever comes after us? Will they read our cities? Or will they name them the way the Aztecs named Teotihuacan? After gods, because the idea of humans doing it seemed impossible? There is a 9th city, and it was not on this list because what was found beneath it changes the question entirely. That is where we go next. If you are still here, subscribe. The next video will be worth it.